They told you it was about borders. They told you it was about jobs. They promised a safer, more prosperous America. But there's a part of the plan they didn't talk about, a part that goes far beyond the political rallies and cable news debates. It's the fine print, and it's a bill that's about to land directly on your kitchen table. We're talking about a policy shift so massive, its economic consequences are almost impossible to wrap your head around. But today, we're going to break it down. We're going to follow the money, not the rhetoric. For a moment, let's forget the talking points and just look at the numbers, because those numbers tell a story about your grocery bill, your job security, and the future of the Social Security you've been paying into your entire life. For the past decade, I've analyzed government budgets and economic policies, and what the data shows isn't a political issue. It's a mathematical one. This isn't about left versus right. It's about what's in your wallet. And the numbers warn of a severe blow to the U.S. economy if this path continues. Imagine your grocery bill jumping higher, not over a few years, but in the near future. That's not a hypothetical, it's a direct projection based on removing a huge part of the workforce that gets food from the farm to your plate. They promised this would save American jobs and secure the border, but what they didn't mention is that you'd be footing the bill in more ways than one. We're going to peel back the layers of a multi-billion-dollar enforcement surge and expose how it's set up to trigger a chain reaction that hits your personal finances from every angle. First, let's talk about the sticker price. Policies aren't free, especially not one that involves tracking, detaining, and transporting millions of people. While the exact cost per deportation varies, estimates from 2024 put the price for each removal at around $13,000 for taxpayers. But that's just the transportation ticket. The real money is in the vast infrastructure needed to make it all happen. In 2025, Congress approved a budget allocating an unprecedented $170 billion over several years for immigration enforcement. Let's put that number in perspective. A huge chunk, about $45 billion, is set aside for building new detention centers, with nearly $30 billion more for ICE's enforcement and deportation operations. This funding is designed to dramatically increase the number of people who can be held in detention at once, potentially doubling the capacity to over 100,000. Think about the sheer scale of this. To even try to remove 1 million people a year, a stated goal for some, you'd need a logistical operation bigger than any law enforcement action in world history. A study from the American Immigration Council estimated that arresting, detaining, and processing millions could cost hundreds of billions. For instance, just detaining the estimated 11 million long-term undocumented population could run over $167 billion, with another $89 billion just to arrest them. So where does this money come from? It comes from you. But it's not just new spending, it's a choice. Every $1 billion spent building a detention facility is $1 billion not spent repairing roads, funding schools, or investing in research. A significant portion of this massive budget benefits private, for-profit prison companies, which have historically held a vast majority, often around 70–80% of all people in ICE custody. This isn't just a government program, it's a massive wealth transfer from taxpayers to private corporations. And while we spend billions to remove people, we're also erasing a major source of tax revenue. In 2022, undocumented immigrants paid an estimated $96.7 billion in federal, state, and local taxes. That includes $59.4 billion in federal taxes and $37.3 billion that funds schools, first responders, and infrastructure in your community. When that revenue vanishes, the burden to make up the difference falls on everyone else. That isn't a fiscal saving. It's a fiscal hole. The inflation shockwave, why your groceries cost more. So we've covered the enormous direct cost, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. The far more painful impact for most Americans comes from something less direct, but much more personal: inflation. This is where the policy stops being a line item in a federal budget and starts being a number on your receipt at the grocery store. The logic pushed by supporters is simple: remove immigrant workers, and wages for American workers will go up. But the economy is far more complex, and the data paints a very different picture. A massive, sudden removal of workers is a profound economic shock. It's a labor shortage by design, and shortages drive up prices. Let's look at agriculture. The industry has faced a labor shortage for years, a problem that became even more urgent in 2025. Undocumented workers make up about a quarter of the entire farm workforce nationally. In certain roles, like harvesting crops, that figure is closer to a third. These are physically demanding, often seasonal jobs that are hard to fill. When you remove a huge portion of that workforce, two things happen. First, crops can be left to rot in the fields because there aren't enough hands to pick them. Projections warn this could lead to unharvested crops and increased food costs. Second, farmers' labor costs skyrocket. Farmers don't just absorb those costs, they are passed directly on to you. One economic model projected that a large-scale deportation could cause food prices to climb by nearly 9%. That's a major hit to every family's budget. And it's not just about agriculture. Take a walk through any new housing development, and you'll see the same story. The construction industry is another area heavily reliant on immigrant labor. Undocumented workers make up around 17% to 19% of the construction workforce, with concentrations over 30% in critical trades like roofing and drywall. In 2025, a staggering 92% of construction firms told the Associated General Contractors of America that they were struggling to find workers. This labor crisis means the homes we desperately need aren't being built, or they're built much more slowly and at a much higher cost. The cost to build a house goes up, which means the price you pay for a new home, or the rent you pay for an apartment also goes up. A policy of mass deportation would pull an estimated 1.5 million workers out of the construction sector alone, crippling an industry already struggling to keep up. Research from groups like the International Monetary Fund and the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas has shown that immigration can actually help reduce inflation by filling labor gaps. By engineering a labor crisis, mass deportation does the exact opposite. It shrinks the supply of labor, reduces output, and pushes prices higher for everyone. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive part of the story. The central promise of this policy was that it would open up jobs for American workers. The slogan, "They're taking our jobs," has been a powerful political tool for decades. But economic research consistently shows the opposite can be true. Mass deportation doesn't just create jobs for U.S.-born workers, it can also eliminate them. How is that possible? It's a concept called labor complementarity. Simply put, workers with different skills often complement each other like gears in a machine. If you remove one gear, the whole machine can grind to a halt. Think back to that construction site. You have a team of roofers, many of whom may be undocumented. They finish their work, and now the site is ready for the next phase. That's when the U.S.-born electricians, plumbers, and HVAC specialists come in. But what happens if the roofing crew never shows up because they've been deported? The roof doesn't get built, and the electrician, plumber, and HVAC tech don't get a call. Their jobs haven't been given to someone else. Their jobs have simply vanished because the economic ecosystem they depended on was broken. This isn't just a theory. The Economic Policy Institute, EPI, ran a simulation on what would happen if 4 million people were deported. Their findings were staggering. It could result in a loss of nearly 6 million total jobs, with 2.6 million of those belonging to U.S.-born workers. Another study from the Baker Institute suggested removing just 500,000 immigrant workers could lead to the loss of 44,000 jobs for the U.S.-born. Of course, these are economic models and not everyone agrees. The White House, for instance, claimed that 2 million jobs for native-born workers were actually gained in 2025. But the job loss models work like this. Deportations don't just remove workers, they remove consumers and taxpayers. An undocumented immigrant isn't just a roofer. They're also a customer at the local grocery store and the person buying a car from the local dealership. When they're removed, that economic activity disappears, businesses see their revenues fall, and they may be forced to lay off other workers, including U.S.-born workers. The nonpartisan Penn-Wharton budget model also projected that mass deportation would substantially reduce both employment and overall GDP. The idea that you can remove millions of people from the economy without a massive negative ripple effect is an economic fantasy. The Social Security time bomb. You didn't see coming. Of all the hidden costs, this might be the most personal, especially if you're anywhere near retirement. We all know Social Security is facing long-term financial challenges. The system relies on today's workers paying taxes to support today's retirees. For the system to stay solvent, you need more people paying in than taking out. For decades, a silent subsidy has been keeping the Social Security system healthier than it otherwise would be. Undocumented immigrants. Here's how it works. Many are employed on the books, using a tax ID number or a number that isn't theirs. As a result, payroll taxes for Social Security and Medicare are automatically deducted from their paychecks, just like for any other worker. But because of their immigration status, they are ineligible to ever collect those benefits. They pay into the system their entire working lives but can never make a claim. The Social Security Administration itself has acknowledged that these workers have a net positive effect on the program's finances. The numbers are huge. In 2022, undocumented workers paid an estimated $25.7 billion into Social Security and another $6.4 billion into Medicare. By 2023, one analysis put their annual Social Security contribution at $26.2 billion. This is billions in pure profit for the system that goes directly to paying benefits for current American retirees. Now, imagine what happens when you remove that revenue stream. A study from the American Immigration Council warned a large-scale deportation plan would slash Social Security funding by $23 billion and Medicare by $6 billion each year. This wouldn't just strain the system, it would accelerate its path toward insolvency. The money that was shoring up the trust funds would suddenly be gone, forcing a painful choice: either cut benefits for American retirees or significantly raise taxes on the remaining American workers. This policy takes a known solution: a younger workforce funding the retirement of an older one, and throws it into reverse, threatening a program millions of Americans depend on for their survival. The data is overwhelming, and it all points in one direction. The economic consequences of this policy are not a matter of debate among most economists. They are a matter of degree. We are trading a functioning, complex economic ecosystem for a simple, politically powerful narrative, and the cost of that trade is being paid by every single one of us. If this information has been valuable, consider subscribing. My goal isn't to tell you what to think, but to give you the data and analysis you won't find on the nightly news. Share this video with someone who needs to see the real numbers behind the headlines. So let's bring it all together. They promised you jobs, but the data shows mass deportations can be a job killer for U.S. citizens. They promised you prosperity, but the numbers point toward a serious economic contraction and GDP loss. They promised to make America stronger, but they are accelerating the financial problems of Social Security, a bedrock of American retirement. And they are doing it all with a price tag of hundreds of billions of your tax dollars, funneled into a massive enforcement and detention machine. This isn't just about economics, it's about our shared future. While rare, there have been documented cases of U.S. citizens being wrongfully detained or even shot by enforcement agents. The risk of these tragedies grows when enforcement is scaled up so massively and due process is streamlined. It creates a climate of fear that extends beyond the undocumented community, chilling economic activity and tearing at the fabric of families where U.S. citizen children live with undocumented parents. The picture painted by the data is not one of renewed prosperity. It's a picture of self-inflicted economic damage. It is a potential future with higher grocery bills, fewer jobs, a weaker economy, and a strained social safety net. The numbers aren't political. They are simply the consequences of a policy choice. The question for all of us is whether this trade-off is one we are willing to make. Demand better. Look past the rhetoric and demand solutions based on economic reality, not political fantasy. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. Let's discuss real solutions based on the facts.